All right. Well, welcome, all of you that are here semi-live, and for all the people who are checking in later on YouTube, welcome to today's talk. And I've got the screensaver up so we can. I think I've got the screensaver up. Do I? Let me. Let me. I better go for it and share it. All right. Okay. Good. Yeah. Spiritual practice of love and. Uh, the quote from Bell Hooks, which will is key. She's underneath a lot of what I'm teaching today. We'll talk about more her. And here's another quote from Bell just to begin, and then we'll drop the screensaver and go on. She says in her book, All About Love, which I really recommend you, if you've never read any Bell, it'd be a good introduction to her. Uh, she says, Had I been given a clear definition of love earlier in my life, it would not have taken me so long to become a more loving person. Interesting. And that all these things I'll be talking about today will be in the notes. But that quote, had I been given a clearer definition of love earlier in my life, it would not have taken me so long to become a more loving person. Yeah. So with that, we'll jump into the talk here. And yeah, our talk today will have three parts, focusing on three questions. First question is, what is love? And we'll devote a little bit of time to that. And then the second question is, what is spirit? Because our theme is, or our talk is, this love is a spiritual practice, and so we have to talk about both love and spirit. And then we'll end up talking about practice, the third part, and I'll lay out for me what I see as eight great ways to practice love. Because if you're not practicing it, maybe it's an idea, but it's not. It's really not going to get the healing and the energetic effect of love. So let's just jump into the first question: What is love? Uh, well, I want to talk about a couple of other cultures besides when we're asking in 21st century, what is love? And most of us, at least in Europe or the West, what does it really mean? I want to talk about a couple other cultures. The primitive cultures in Norway, Sweden, and Finland, those higher Scandinavian cultures, the Sami languages, which are the indigenous languages, they had 300 different words for types of snow, tracks in snow, and the condition and the use of snow. You can tell what's important to a culture by the number of words that they use to describe it, because their whole existence depended on navigating snow. They had 300 different words for types of snow. In the native Hawaiian culture, on the Hawaiian language, it features over 200 distinct words and specific names for rain. Interesting, because it was important. You had to navigate that. You had to navigate that. And so that was an important thing. Now, in 21st century America, we have one word, love, that has come to mean both everything and nothing. I mean, uh, love is a Subaru. Well, it's got to be different than, when we say, I love my wife or I love my country. I love New York, LUV, New York. We got this one word, and it really is. It just shows you that we really, if we don't have 200 words for love, shows you we have one word. How important is it? How much of our culture is centered on love? And that shows us something. Now, I want to talk about one more culture, the Greek culture. They had seven different words for types of love, and I want to go through these quickly. The Greeks they were more interested in it. We lost something there, but I mean, it's in our tradition, so we can pick it up. And here, and this will be in the notes. but I'll just give you the seven different words that the Greeks use for different types of love. Okay, storge was the first, and that is a love of your family. It's the first thing we met when we came out of our mother, and we were in our mother. We were in family for 9 months. Chances are, but so to say you love a member of your family, that's storge. Philia is another Greek word that means friendship. Okay, the love we have for friends. And that would be, very, very much philia is what you feel in a community like this. There's, and sometimes there's a family here. There's a mother, a grandmother, and a daughter here. We have with the Vickers. They come so that it's doubling. There's familiar, and then there's this kind of friendship, philia. Ludus is an interesting word. Ludus means flirting. They even, they said, that's not exactly, big time, but it is something they had a word for when you start flirting with somebody. Now, the more serious thing that mostly we boil down when we think about love, we think of eros, which means passion. It means sexual attraction. Or you fall in love, or you really, you see somebody love at first sight. That does happen. But eros also means the life force. And so you can have an erotic relationship with life and actually not have a particular partner. It just means you're in touch with the life force. So eros is the fourth. Philotia is it was called self-love, but I think a better understanding of that would be self-care, taking care of yourself, loving yourself enough to take care of yourself, to have healthy boundaries. And the kind of meditation we did for the guys here earlier, and that we're going to repeat, is a loving kindness meditation where we actually are, we're actually sending kindness to each and every cell, and that's a kind of self care, and and you can even do meditation for that. So that's important too. And then the sixth word for love that they had was pragma. You might know the word pragmatic. Now, pragma means a committed relationship, and that is a different, whole different thing of love too. Pam and I just celebrated our 55th uh, uh, anniversary. We knew each other for 5 years before that. I met her, and we met each other in our junior year, in between junior and senior year. So we've been actually together 60 years, although we've had a couple of breakdowns in that, but still, committed relationship is another kind of love. And then the kind of love we're really talking about when we're talking about love as a spiritual practice, it includes all those six to other types, but the word in Greek is agape, and that is when Jesus in the Gospel of John and on the Holy Thursday night, he boils down everything he's been trying to teach these numbskulls into 8 words. They're sometimes called the Great 8 Words, and he said, "Don't get." You don't have to get into theology to really understand what Jesus was talking about. He said, love one another as I have loved you. And the gospel was written in Greek. Most of the early gospels are written in Greek, or at least translated into Greek pretty quickly. I mean, of course, Jesus spoke Aramaic, but the word when he's saying love one another as I have loved you, he's not talking about eros. He's not talking about flirting, ludos. He's talking about agape. That's the word that actually they wrote in Greek. And that's a kind of spiritual love in action. That's what we're talking about. And that is the biggest envelope for all the different types of love. Love as the Spirit would love as a God would love. In the whole Judeo-Christian thing we call the Bible, uh, and Jesus is a good example of this. Jesus keeps saying what God is like. This kingdom of heaven is also like a cover term, and he says the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast put into a loaf. It's like this, it's like this, it's like this, you see. Uh, and there's only two times where they actually say God is rather than God is like, because the Jewish people would not even pronounce the holy names. Uh, and that's in the first letter of John. And he says twice, he says, a God is agape in Greek. God is love. Yeah, it's the only time that anybody ever, at least in those two traditions, had said that. Okay. And so we're talking about this particular largest form of love that includes all the other types, by the way. It's like Russian dolls, you know, this is the biggest Russian doll, agape. And that means a kind of love in action. Okay. Now, my favorite definition of this comes from a guy named M. Scott Peck. I wrote a book in the late 70s called The Road Less Traveled. And this is what and Bell Hooks quotes this in her All About Love. She said, "Gee, if I'd had a really clearer definition of what I'm really looking for, I could have become a loving person much quicker." And so this is sort of famous definition by Peck, and he said, "Love is the willingness to extend oneself for the purpose of nurturing one's own or another's spiritual growth." Again, I have all this in the notes when you get it, but let this sink in. Love is the willingness. And mostly when we think of love, we think it's an emotion that comes and goes and you know, it's a feeling. No, he's talking about agape now. That kind of love, the biggest kind of love, is a willingness to extend oneself, is work. Uh, you know, extending means, you know, you're stretching. Love is the willingness to stretch oneself for the purpose of nurturing one's own or another's spiritual growth. Now, that's the definition that Bell liked. And I remember before I read Bell Hooks, I read M. Scott Peck, and I said, yeah, all right, that's a different kind of love. That's not falling in love. That's not flirting. Those things are all okay. It's not passion. It's not sex. Uh, it's something that's bigger than all the other six definitions. Yeah, so I'd like to put that out as a definition, a working definition as we talk today, because we're talking about love as a spiritual practice. We're talking about that kind of uh, willingness and a willingness to extend yourself, to stretch yourself, but mostly for the purpose of nurturing one's own or another's spiritual growth. Well, to accept that, you have to look into, well, what is spirit? Okay, what is spirit? You know, a lot of people say, well, I mean, when I grew up, the Holy Trinity in the Catholic Church was the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost, and so it became the Holy Spirit. But that idea that it's a little bit hard, you know, a ghost, a spirit, what is that? And so I want to do a screensaver now to give you an image of what I think one way to look at spirit, and so I've got to pull it up here. Got to use your left brain a lot when you do this kind of stuff. But and we're using words, so we're really working with the left brain, of course. Trying to understand something that's bigger than the left brain. This is tricky. Okay, so here's one a sort of a homemade thing, but it gives you the idea of what I'm talking about with spirit when we talk about spirit. Now, this is just my take on it. You know, somebody else might have something else, but here's what a mystic, a Jesuit mystic, Teilhard de Chardin, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, sometimes just called Teilhard. He said something that was, I think, a little important. It was important, and this is a picture of what he's talking about. He said, and this is, I think, a great quote. He said, "We're not human beings having a spiritual experience or trying to have a spiritual experience. Trying is not the point." But he says, "We're not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience." And that line of thought has been echoed with a lot of other people that we think we're this human, and then there's God out there or the spirit. We're trying to close the gap, whereas Teilhard thought, well, the spirit, whatever that is, God, Allah, with all the ways of languaging this transpersonal thing that plays by other rules. uh, Teilhard said, well, it's trying to have an experience of what it really means to be human, you know? And so this is be what it would look like, what that statement would look like. That spirit is really this composite, and it's also in motion of a body. The first thing, and when we come out of our mother is, the first thing that forms is the body, and then the mind, the consciousness, and then the heart and the soul. And when by heart and soul, we're talking about those qualities that connect to the transcendence. So we have a body and a mind. If those of you who know the whole brain kind of uh, deal, the body and mind, it's that's important. If the body doesn't live, then this whole thing falls apart, and then we're just go back to the spirit again. So to maintain the body in time and space, uh, we need the left brain, and so this actually shows the whole consciousness there. Our body has a certain kind of intelligence. It's amazing. And then the mind is this part of ourselves that can think and find the link for Zoom and things like that. And just so that's very important. But then there's a whole other part of consciousness. This is what Einstein meant when he was talking about imagination is more important than knowledge. When Einstein said we're not using our entire brain, he was even mean we're not using all of our left brain, but we certainly, I was educated to be a left brain. I was a left brain on a stick, in a way, for most of my life until I, grew into the right brain. Okay. Uh, so the mandala describes what this looks like. Now, spirit, let's some other ways of languaging, even just the word spirit, uh, would be the life force energy of the universe. Okay. Uh, Dante, Jesus, Dante, the Sufis generally, Rumi especially, they call it love in action. When Dante got 1,000 lines of Italian poetry, got you uh, through hell and purgatory, and then to the final place, which is in a kind of white rose where and his last line, it's where he's reached the point where he's discovered the love that moves the sun and all the other stars. So love in action. Love is not it's not a commodity. It's not a Subaru. That's something else. Okay, love is actually the life force energy of the universe, but people language it differently. And there's a whole tradition which I'm closest to, which calls it love. Okay, or even the Dalai Lama, he said, "My religion is love." Okay, uh, and so that's why another way of talking about it is our true self, our core reality, essence, wholeness. To be whole as the universe is whole, which is one of the lines, at least how it came out in Aramaic. We translated it into be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect, but that's kind of was a real trap for me. The better translation is be whole as the universe whole. So these are all ways of languaging this spirit, this thing that's transpersonal, bigger than personal. Personal is good. I mean, you can't, we're the spirit having a personal experience here. So it's holy. Okay. You don't have to get out of, you don't have to leave the ego. You do have to work with it a little bit. It gets in the way. It's that thing that keeps us from crossing the threshold into really finding out who we are. Buckminster Fuller, the brilliant guy who was born cross-eyed, and it wasn't corrected till much later, so he was born seeing the world different. He's the guy who invented the geodesic dome. And Fuller said God is a verb. Well, yeah, yeah. So therefore, you can't put it in a box. It's the same way that a river is a verb, but in our language we call a river a noun. But if you dip a dipper into the dip a bucket into the river and you pull it out, you don't have the river in the bucket. You got water. Okay, the river is moving. And if a river doesn't move, it starts to become stagnant and can't support life. So this idea that it's all a verb, now we're actually, when you're talking about spirit, you're talking about exactly what both quantum physics and astrophysics guys are talking about. Okay, it's everything is in motion. How can the universe is expanding constantly? It's constantly in motion and it's expanding. Well, our inner life is meant to be the same. Yeah, yeah. And this is, this idea of spirit is this idea of what Jill Bolte Taylor talks about in Whole Brain Living. She says the we inside of me. You know, we are actually not this lonely guy on the planet at 76 years old. We're actually, we contain multitudes. Yeah. So all this could be ways of languaging the word spirit. It's quite big. It's quite big. So when we're talking about a spiritual practice, we're talking about things that actually do reinforce the fact that we're never disconnected from this life force energy. And as these practices release the energy in human beings, and not doing these practices, being just, again, when Bell talked about in that opening quote, love allows us to enter paradise. Still, many of us wait outside the gates, unable to cross the threshold. The threshold is a very interesting thing. The novice Sufis are called they're called thresholders in their language. They're people who stand in the threshold between two worlds, and we all do. There's the room, like I'm in this room here, and there's a threshold there, and then it's like has no width, and so when you're in one room and then you step into another room, a threshold is something you cross, but it's not like a thing, and so they call dervishes the whirling dervish. Dervishes just means a novice. You're a novice. You're a thresholder. You're standing on the threshold between the world of time and space and in the world of eternity and infinity. The world that can be sort of hellish or purgatorial, and then uh, the paradise that she's talking about. But even though love allows us to enter paradise at any moment, that's the Zen guys talk about the gateless gate of paradise. How do you enter the gateless gate? There's no gate. There's no lock. How do you enter it? And she's talking about the same thing. Love allows us to just come on in. But many of us wait outside the gates, unable to cross the threshold, unable to leave behind, here's the key, all the stuff we have accumulated that gets in the way of love. And so, and that's where meditation comes in. When the guys who came in the morning, we talked about that meditation is really a way to get rid of all the stuff that stands in the way of just crossing that threshold. And the whole practice of meditation, which is one of the practices of love, uh, uh, it's about allowing ourselves to uh, leave everything that gets in the way, which is basically the left brain, because when we're going across this threshold into uh, out of time and space and into eternity and infinity, which we can do at any moment. You don't have to die to do this. And certainly when you die, it's like being born. It's a transition. And but we always are in. eternity and infinity and time and space. Okay. So that leads us to the really the meaty part of this is what are well, I'm going to give you 8 great practices of love, but there's many more, and they overlap all over the place. But I'm going to put up another visual of this, and then we'll sort of tease these out. This is the thing I think that really will once we get our definitions down, we have some kind of common language for talking about love and spirit. Well, then the practices. So here's the kind of a primitive diagram, uh, not very high tech, of the 8 great practices. Now, uh, of love. And it's meant to look like a wagon wheel. And a wagon wheel is a good example. I got a batik here of a wagon wheel, and there's the hub, and then the 8 spokes. And so the Buddha liked that. He has the Eightfold Path. Jesus liked that. He has the 8 Beatitudes. There's something about that. And a wagon wheel is a good example of that because things look very different at the rim, but at the center, they're all united, you see. So, love, these are all practices of love. So, let's go through them and I'll just make a few comments of them. And again, all this is in the notes, and if this is helpful to you. Uh, Here's something from Bell in her book, All About Love. Love is an action, she says. Love is an action. That's key. Love is a verb. Okay. Love is an action. We must move beyond the realm of feeling to actualize love. We must move beyond the realm of feeling to actualize love. Well, this idea that love is a feeling that comes and goes and it's all connected with falling in love and romance, uh, that actually is something that gets in the way. Okay, and that you have to, it has to be for another person. It can be, and it's lovely when it is for many people. Really, it's great, but it doesn't mean you're having sex with many people or you're falling in love with many people. We must move beyond the realm of feeling to actualize love. This is why it's useful to see love as a practice. Okay. And that's my point too. So let's look at these. I'll just make a few comments, and they're certainly not exhaustive, these 8, but I think they're 8 great practices, and there are many more. First thing is care. A practice of love is care. Now we all started, no matter what our mother was like, and this is why the start of all kind of basic practice for Tibetans and gratitude starts with mother, because whether you got along with your mother or not, whether your mother disappeared on you or she was great, it doesn't make any difference. Some woman carried us and cared for us in the best way she could for, whatever the term was, 7, 8, 9 months. And that you can't, none of us would be here. That's the delivery system that we all came through. And so that's initially. Now, your mother, and there's kids now who experience this, your mother smoked crack or whatever, that all comes into the mix. And then maybe the care is not so great. Uh, but still, we all came. And so that's where mother is like, mother practice in Tibetan Buddhism is one of the pinnacle ones because it's a practice of gratitude. Somebody cared enough for us to deliver us into this world. So that's one kind of care. Okay. And then there's the way we care for other people. Okay. Uh, you guys cared enough to show up. You know, I cared enough to work on this talk for more than a week. Let me tell you, because I wanted to bring. I thought it was important. So there's a lot of ways we care for each other, or we don't care for each other. Unfortunately, we're living in a country where the people who, I mean, the idea of a government is that the original idea, at least in the Greek conception, is the government, the real thing, it cared about uh, the flourishing of the people, the flourishing of all the people, and that was it. And when you just reflect for a moment on at least our current government, it cares about other things. And we sort of lost that. That's really what Jefferson meant when he said in the pursuit of happiness. Happiness was his word he used in English, but he was a student of the Greeks, and he understood eudaimonia, which was the word for we translate into happiness, but Aristotle meant the purpose of the government is the flourishing of the people. That's what he really meant, the pursuit of flourishing in your own life. So that's care. Now, affection, it comes actually because of the care. Um, Modern psychology talks a lot about holding, how we were held, okay, and the holding environment. And the um, practice we're going to use as we go into meditation today is a practice of loving kindness. That's another way of looking at affection. It doesn't mean to be smitten with somebody, it just means to be able to actually be uh, loving and kind. Okay. And the way we're held as kids, but the modern psychologists have a whole thing on just holding how we're held physically. And still, even though maybe, sex is not important to you, you know, I think holding hands is one of the great things in life and just to be able to hug somebody. So there's all forms of holding there. And that means affection. And we'll double back because there's practices. Buddhism has practices at all these levels. And to practice loving kindness is to practice affection. And we're going to do it today for ourselves. Hardest thing to have affection for sometimes is your own self. Now, recognition, very interesting, uh, as a practice, a recognition. Um, People who understand the fact that we lived in clans of probably 30 to 40 people for hundreds of thousands of years, that was a kind of big family. Uh, uh, they say we're born into a world of 40 sets of eyes. And now we live in nuclear families where maybe we don't even have a husband, a dad, and a mom. Maybe there's a single mother just because of the circumstances. There's not even two people and no other kids. I was born into a family with uh, absent father, mother, grandmother, two older sisters. You know, it's different, but we were born we evolved being born into clans that had 40 sets of eyes. Now, sometimes your mother can't see you, sometimes your father can't see you, and sometimes, all they can't really see you. That's why if you saw the movie Avatar, the Na'vi people, these kind of blue cat-like people, when they met somebody, the way you really said "I love you" is "I see you," and many of the people I work with in my own sense of uh, you get the feeling whether people see you or not. And that's, I see you is a great compliment. It is love. Okay. Uh, and to be seen, to be seen, deeply for who you are, not for the surface of it, not for the surface of it. So that's recognition. The Tibetans have a saying recognition and liberation are simultaneous. And to be deeply seen by one other person is liberating, you see. And there's a lot of, and then this fourth one, respect. These first four are really, uh, it's like our early experience in the home. And respect uh, is a deep word. If you think of the Tibetan practice, uh, the old Tibetan custom was a baby was born, they looked at it and they said, "This is a Buddha to be." Didn't matter what your size was, didn't matter if you had all 10 fingers and toes. They had this deep practice where they said, "This is a Buddha to be." And if you're old enough to have seen the early roots thing, there was an African American thing where they held Kunta Kinte up when he was born. These guys are slaves. They're not even treated like human beings, but they had the old African thing. He held the picture of him holding him up under the stars and saying, You are you are you're phenomenal. Those kinds of things in the African tradition, and then of course you've got in the Hindu tradition the beautiful thing when you meet somebody now they go namaste. The God in me greets the God in you. This is respect. Now those four things, depending on what your family of origin was, and again, you know, uh, not there weren't 40 pairs of eyes. I had the eyes of my grandmother and my father, who wasn't around much because he was a workaholic working at the restaurant. But when he was around, it wasn't actually. My ears were too big, and things like that. It wasn't really helpful. Wasn't really helpful. I didn't know what he did. Why wasn't he around? There was no recognition. There was no affection. He was you know, so we all have a different mix of what happened in our family. Now, the last four actually have to do with our later in life that can come in. Now, the next one, community, where we are right now. Okay, and I've got a couple of quotes about community here. One is by Eddie Glaude Jr., great current intellectual, works at Rutgers now, but African American uh, a teacher of great depth, and he said, in our time, with so much hatred and venom in our politics, and hitting the nail on the head there. In our time, with so much hatred and venom in our politics and our culture, we must actively cultivate communities of love that allow us to imagine different ways of being together. They're profound. And he's right on it. In this times, with so much hatred and venom in our politics and our culture, we must actively cultivate communities of love that allow us to imagine different ways of being together. And exactly, and that speaks to this community for the last 6 years. We've imagined our way to this point, and we keep imagining our way to this point. And our culture is not a loving culture. All you need to do is watch the news. $20 million. I spent $20 million to develop gloves for their guys that actually are electrified. So when they grab somebody, they get an electric shock and they're on the ground. That's our tax money. That's not love. So we have to reimagine. We have to imagine, but we need communities of love, which is what you have to find. And you can be in multiple communities of love. Some of you are in 12-step groups. Some of you just have a circle of really close friends, so, actually, where two or three are together, that is community. So it's not about numbers. It's about cultivating a community of love. And the fact that Joe and I started this, 6 years ago, and now there's a dozen or a baker's dozen of people who are willing. Tomorrow we got somebody from the community that is cultivating this community is going to come and speak, to the group to inspire the group. So it's not just me or Jill, and that's how we've been cultivating this community. Now the other quote is from Merton, and this is actually quoted in the book. Bell Hooks really liked Merton. I think they probably corresponded. Merton corresponded with everybody, but she included this Merton quote: "Love is our true destiny." Destino, in Italian, it means the star. So we have to go deep to the idea that we all have a destiny. And in the old days, before Netflix and TV and all that, the big show at night was the Late Show was looking in the stars and making up stories about the stars, about how we're related to those stars. And then there was that belief that uh, there was a star for you. You had a destiny. Destino in the Italian means the star. You find your own star. You don't want to miss your own star. So love is our true destiny. And then Merton goes on, he says, we do not find the meaning of life by ourselves alone. We find it with another. And so that's talking about this community. And Merton understood that. He lived in the community with the brothers for over 20 years. And then he was ready to go out and be a hermit. But when he was a hermit, he was connecting with the whole world. If he had had email, God knows. But I mean, he was typing out 10 or 15, there was nothing to type out 10 or 15 letters a day and sending them out because he was connecting with everybody. He had a world community at that point. But love is our true destiny. Think about that. Think about that. And then finally, commitment. We got the community leads us into the last three. Commitment, pragma uh, in the Greek parlance, which meant a committed relationship, but it doesn't just mean a committed relationship to uh, another person, which we may or may not. Commitment to a community. You guys showed up today. A commitment uh, to your relationship with the spirit. I have a plaque up in Lucy Hollow that has it was in Latin, but it's translated. It says, bidden or not bidden, God is here. I mean, so showing up every day to have a relationship with the divine in your own way, but haven't shown up every day. God's not, we don't show up. God, bidden or unbidden, the spirit is here. Where else could it be? You see. So that commitment can be for a spiritual practice to give time every day because it's our destiny. This other stuff comes and goes, your jobs, your roles, your bank account. Yeah. So commitment is important practice. And some of you have been here almost every uh, session for 6 years. That is really a practice of love. Trust, another great practice, and I think trust is a better a translation of the word faith, hope, and love. Well, I think trust is a better word because faith starts to become belief. I believe in this, I'm a Protestant or I'm a Catholic or Sufi. No, I think it has to do with what you trust. And here again, Merton, he said the opposite of faith is not doubt, it's certainty. So this is very subtle if you think about real trust. So can you trust the mystery that is this universe, the uncertainty that is this universe? Pema Chodron's one of her best books. It's kind of like the greatest hits of Pema. It's called Comfortable with Uncertainty. And so this kind of trust is different than certainty. If you're certain of something, it requires no trust. 2 + 2 = 4, at least in the base 10. But to live in this universe where nothing is really certain, uh, you know, uh, and just to feel more and more like you're comfortable and open to the uncertainty. That's trust. And with people, often people will tell me I'm working with a lot of people, and they'll say, I just don't know if I can trust that person. And I said, well, trust them. That's the only way to find out if somebody's trustworthy. You trust them. And so you generally have that point of view that you just say, all right, I trust that person. And then you will find out if they're trustworthy. That's the only way you know. If you try to judge it without, yeah. So trust is it's actually a practice of love to just trust. And then finally, communication, what we're doing now. Okay. And what we actually devote a third of our normal heart to hearts. The third thing is that we have direct communication in the community. These you see how these things overlap and entwine. None of them are separate. Uh, and that's what we'll do today. At from 11:15 to 12, we'll have a chance for the whole community to speak. Your heart knows what's true. And when you listen with it and then you speak from it, that's what we do as a community. That's why this is called a heart to heart community. Yeah, yeah. Well, there's a little, I have much more here in the notes, but we really don't have time for it. And if you get the notes, you'll see Well, here's just one final image here for you. Uh, what gets in the way? Well, our own left brain, the ego. And there's nothing wrong with the ego. We have to have one. We don't want to get rid of it. But we're really all egoholics. When I did a talk about the 11th step for a bunch of guys in Cincinnati, and there were people, hi, I'm Joe, I'm an alcoholic, I'm Joe, I'm a Narcotics Anonymous, or there were Sex Anonymous people, there was all the various 12 steps people. But I was talking about the 11th step, which is to become closer to your higher power, to prayer and through prayer and meditation. So when it got around to me, I said, "Hi, I'm Joe. I'm an egoholic," which covers it all. Because the essence of ego, what gets in the way with our ego? Three things: control, judgment, and just basic resistance. And that's operating in all of us. And we're all sort of addicted to all of them because that's how we stay safe. We think. And so that we're all egoholics. The only question is, are you in recovery? In other words, are you working with these three things? Because if you want to know what keeps you from crossing the threshold into love, it would be some variation on those three. It's sort of the what I call the unholy trinity: control, judgment, and resistance. When it's an addiction, it gets in the way. We all have to have some kind of control. I'm a little bit over time here, 2 minutes over where I wanted to, but part of me says, that's a judgment part. But see, when these things are when they're an addiction, they will keep you out of love. Uh, yeah, and then the final question here, which I'll leave you with, is: Do you have an ego, or does your ego have you? That's really a good question. And sometimes, day in, day out, my ego has me. That's when I'm addicted to control, judgment, resistance. And you cannot love when one of those things is firing out. It's not a love relationship. And it's been a lot of woe in my own life and in our marriage because those things have been more important to me than loving my own wife. And I regret that. I'm working on it. All right. Well, that's good enough for now. We'll come back in about 15 for a chance to sit with all this, and we'll practice the loving kindness meditation. We'll practice one of these. All right. Thank you for listening. Appreciate it.